Today, we're diving into a proposed bill in the U.S. Congress that honestly could be a huge deal for millions of Americans. It's called the Exclusive Citizenship Act, and it could force a really tough choice about identity, loyalty, and frankly, where you call home. So let's just get right to the heart of it with the big question. Could the right to be a dual citizen in the United States actually be taken away? For a lot of people, that's a wild thought. So let's unpack what that would even mean. All right, so what are we actually talking about here? This isn't just a random idea, it's a specific bill. It was introduced by Republican Senator Bernie Moreno, and it's called the Exclusive Citizenship Act of 2025. And this bill, well, it doesn't mince words. Its main point is to say you cannot be a U.S. citizen if you're also a citizen of another country. Period. The official reason given? To make sure everyone has sole and exclusive allegiance to the United States. Now, you might be thinking this only affects a small number of people, but you'd be wrong. We're talking about a lot of people. While the U.S. government doesn't actually keep an official count, expert estimates put the number as high as 5.7 million American dual citizens. That is a massive group of people who would suddenly face this life-changing decision. Okay, so let's play this out. If this bill somehow became law, how would it actually work? What's the timeline? And more importantly, what are the consequences if you don't comply? The process they've laid out is pretty stark. Once the bill becomes law, the clock starts ticking. You have 1 year to make a choice. Option 1, you formally renounce your foreign citizenship to keep your U.S. one. Option 2, you renounce your U.S. citizenship. But here's the real kicker. If you do nothing, if you just ignore it, you are automatically considered to have voluntarily relinquished your U.S. citizenship. Just poof. This brings up a huge practical question, right? How would the government even enforce this? Like we said, there's no official list of dual citizens. The bill doesn't really explain how they track down millions of people to make sure they've made their choice. It's a bit of a logistical head-scratcher. And now we get to the real debate at the center of all this. On the one side, you have the bill's official justification, this idea of allegiance. But on the other, the source we're looking at has a completely different take. And that's where we see this clash between the idea of allegiance and the idea of control. So let's put these two views side by side. The bill's supporters say it's about preserving undivided loyalty and preventing any potential conflicts of interest. But the source we're examining, it argues this is really just a tool for government control. They say this whole divided loyalties thing is basically a myth, and what this bill really does is take away options and freedom from citizens. To kind of drive that point home, the source uses this really sarcastic quote. The idea is to show how absurd the divided loyalties argument sounds in the real world for most people. I mean, the chances of a major conflict between, say, the US and Ireland or St. Lucia and Montenegro, it's framed as something that's just not a practical concern. And the source we're analyzing takes its argument even further. They've come up with a theory for what's really motivating this whole thing. They see it as part of a much bigger pattern. And, well, they use a pretty unforgettable metaphor to explain it. The key point here, according to this source, is that you can't look at this bill in a vacuum. They see it as just one more symptom of a government that wants more and more control over its citizens' lives, making it harder for them to have a foot out the door, so to speak. And there it is, the metaphor. The source makes this direct comparison, saying the government's motivation here is like a psycho ex-girlfriend who's mad because they don't have control over you anymore. It's a really provocative analogy, obviously, meant to paint a picture of possessiveness and a desire to clamp down on your freedom. So with that pretty critical view in mind, what does the source actually suggest people do about it? That brings us to our last part, the practical advice, the Plan B strategy, for anyone who's worried about where this might be heading. The advice is very, very direct. It's all about creating options for yourself. They say, don't just stop at a second passport, maybe even get a third. The bigger message is to start planning years ahead. Think about setting up residences abroad, structuring your finances so they're not tied to your U.S. citizenship, and ultimately being mentally and financially prepared to just walk away if you have to. At the end of the day, the core philosophy behind all this advice is simple. It is way, way better to be prepared years too early than to be even one single day too late. The idea is to stay ahead of the curve so you never get caught by surprise. And that really brings us back to where we started. A bill like the Exclusive Citizenship Act would force this monumental decision on millions of people. It takes a complex, layered identity and boils it down to a single binary choice. So it leaves us with one final question for you. If you were forced to choose, what would you do? Something to think about.